Hi there, I'm Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez, and this is the Design Your Physician Life podcast brought to you by our Maxillary Mastermind, a personal and professional development program for physicians. Today, we have a wonderful guest, Dr. Deb Matthew. She's actually a North Carolina physician and America's Happy Hormone Doctor, and we're going to talk with her about designing a 7-day-a-month, 7-figure practice. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Design Your Physician Life podcast, where you will get excited about being a physician, learn the tools that can help boost your success, and great tips from successful doctors. Join us to unlock the keys to an amazing physician life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez.
Hey guys, we're very excited today. We have the wonderful Deb Matthew. She's actually an author, speaker, educator, wife, and mom of 4 boys. She helps you restore your health by addressing the root cause of your symptoms instead of just treating diseases with drugs. She was inspired when she experienced a life-changing transformation after years of suffering with exhaustion and irritability from hormone imbalances that prevented her from being the wife and mother that she wanted to be. Now she's on a mission to spread the message that having balanced hormones can help you to love the way you feel, and that living well is the best medicine. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm a sufferer of that too, and I have the transformation as well, so I can identify with all these things. Now, as a media contributor, she has been featured in magazines, podcasts, national radio shows, and TV appearances on ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, and Fox. And we have her here today. Thank you for being with us, Deb Matthew.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here.
So I met Dr. Matthew at A4M, and the four A's are the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And she's been a mentor to us who participated at that conference for some time now. And she teaches us 2 things. She teaches us how to deal with the patient, and she teaches us as physicians how to deal with our business from a business point of view so that we can then see more patients and be there practicing for joy, right? When we see them and grow our practices and still be, in this business of medicine and caring for patients and achieving these transformations. So let's start first before, all this, to the time now that you're teaching all of us with little Deb. Was it like little Deb or was it like teen Deb who wanted to be a doctor? What was your inspiration?
I don't have one of those really heartwarming stories that, ever since I was 5 and somebody had a boo-boo, I knew that's my calling. The reality is that my father was a doctor, so that's kind of what I knew. And when I went to college, I did pre-med because it was kind of the thing to do. And I really enjoyed it. I like science and everything, but I wasn't 100% convinced. To be really honest, what I kind of wanted to do was to be a secretary. And I totally laugh at that, but I wanted to have long fingernails that clickety-clack on the keyboard. Who knew the doctors were going to be doing so much typing in the future? I wanted to have
Your dream came true.
I know.
Your dream came true. You're a secretary now.
But then when I graduated with my science degree, I didn't really get a job. And so I obviously I recognized that there was more out there. And so I doubled down and did manage to get into medical school. And for a long time, I had a lot of imposter syndrome and felt like I didn't really deserve to be there. It was kind of a really interesting mindset. And actually, my husband was really helpful to me because I had a very self-deprecating sense of humor. Like I'd say things like, oh, I did really well on the test. Must have been an easy test. And he finally at one point said to me, like, if you keep putting yourself down all the time, I know you're joking, but people are going to start to believe it. And that was actually really good advice and really helped me change my mindset. But I actually really struggled with getting into medical school.
Do you know where that came from?
I don't know.
Thoughts?
I don't know.
Because see, I'm guessing I'm gonna ask, did you have good grades going through high school?
I always did well at school. School came easily to me.
Okay, well, it happens, right? We get into those
Yeah,
mindsets and things
yeah,
happen. And then I call it like the computer. We have a computer, we have a little bit of a misprogramming in our computer, and then we need like some
yeah.
reprogramming. Your husband did it well for you.
He did. I do think I know what the problem is that in high school, everything came super easy. Then I went to college and it wasn't so easy. And I didn't get the greatest grades in college. And I had to really learn. That's where I learned how to study. And so I think when I got there thinking I was all this, and then I got brought down because I wasn't all that, it was, sort of shocked my self-esteem a little bit. It's a good learning experience.
There you go. We got it down. See, it was
Yeah.
okay. Well, I want to know, how did you choose? Because then was your father OBGYN? Did you decide no?
My
So how did you
father
get
was
into
rehab
OBGYN?
medicine. But I knew the first day of my very first pediatric rotation as a second-year medical student, by lunchtime, I knew I wanted to be a pediatrician. And in fact, I called he wasn't my husband yet, obviously, he was just my boyfriend at the time. I knew I was ready to have babies. He was like freaking out. I'd only been in pediatrics for like 2 hours.
So that lasted 2 hours of pediatrician. Is that what happened?
No, I was a pediatrician for 10 years before I changed my whole profession.
There you go. So tell us about that.
I had 4 babies and I was working 2 mornings a week at the local health department. And so I was mostly a stay-at-home mom, but I still had my career. I had a reason to get dressed and go somewhere without spit up all over my clothes. I kept my license. I felt like I was doing good for the community, and things were okay. And this is back in 2006. So before there was so much burnout in medicine. And so I was okay. But personally, I was exhausted all the time. Sleep was my favorite hobby. I mean, when my kids were little, my whole day revolved around how was I going to get them all to go to sleep at the same time so I could have a nap, because I couldn't function otherwise. And by the time I had 3 kids, it was impossible. I had to hire a babysitter just to come in so that I could have a nap. I struggled with my weight. I was freezing cold all the time. Even in the summer in North Carolina, I took a sweater everywhere, because when I went into air-conditioned restaurants and movie theaters, I would just shiver uncontrollably. And by this point, I knew that I was hypothyroid. I was on Synthroid. My TSH was in the normal range, but I still had all the symptoms of hypothyroidism. But of course, we know that if your TSH is normal, that you're normal and it can't be your thyroid. And so I just felt like I was a cold-natured person who needed more sleep than everybody else. And then...
And this is someone who's already a physician, right?
Oh, yeah, I was a pediatrician.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got diagnosed with hypothyroidism when I was a resident because I wasn't getting pregnant. I wasn't having periods. And so I got diagnosed. I got put on Synthroid. I felt no different. I'd been feeling this way for probably 10 years before diagnosis, and then another 10 years on Synthroid. So it's been so long, I don't remember what it feels like to be normal anymore. But then what changed for me is I became anxious, where I was never anxious before. Now, all of a sudden I'm anxious. I'm waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks, super irritable, like just flying off the handle at my kids over stupid little things, and then feeling super guilty for being this horrible monster mom. And my husband started calling me from the car on his way home from work, because he could tell by the tone of my voice whether it was safe to come home or whether he needed to stop and suit up with a whole suit of armor to protect himself before he walked in. And like, I went at him. So I something had changed, and I wasn't me. And I knew that how I was feeling wasn't normal, but it was so confusing because nothing in my medical training helped me understand what was wrong with me. I wasn't depressed, but sometimes I just felt super flat. Like I just wanted to sit there and stare at the wall, and my kids would be playing around me. I had no interest in it. I didn't feel right. It was very confusing.
So then the answer would be antidepressants and Xanax, right?
The logical answer would be,
Yeah.
I didn't go there because honestly, I still was just internalizing that this was me. But my husband actually found a book written by Suzanne Somers about women's hormones. And on the back cover of the book, you know how they have all those little like snippets of, are you irritable? Are you not sleeping anymore? And he sort of recognized me and suggested that I read the book. And like at first I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, you want me to read a book by Suzanne Somers, like the Thigh Master and, Chrissy Snow from Three's Company? Like, who's getting their medical advice from Suzanne Somers?
Wait a
But
second. I want to talk about that medical advice in a second, because I want the people here to understand that Deb Matthews' husband is also a physician. I know she mentioned him earlier, but she hasn't said that he's an anesthesiologist.
yeah,
Was he already a pain doctor by then
yeah.
with Susan Summers? So these are, physicians who are still trying to figure out what symptoms Deb has at that time. And they find Suzanne Summers, not a physician, to explain this.
Yeah. And I didn't want to read the book, but I knew that I had to do something. And like, he's getting fed up with me, right? Like, I'm super fortunate that he's patient, because I was not the nice person to be around. I didn't even like myself sometimes. And I hadn't made the connection that, like, it was 1 week I was this crazy wicked witch of the West, and then a couple of weeks later I was a perfectly nice person again. Like, I just hadn't made that connection that there was the cycle to it. But when I read the book, and I read all these stories about women who were like me, they were anxious and couldn't maintain their weight, and they weren't sleeping, et cetera. And then how much better they felt when they got their hormones back into balance. It really started to help me make sense. Like, for example, I read about progesterone and how progesterone is a calming hormone. It's a neurosteroid. It acts on GABA receptors in our brain. It's calming. It helps us sleep. And all I knew about progesterone is that, it's in birth control pills, and it helps prevent postmenopausal bleeding. Like, all we know about is progesterone and our uterine lining. We don't really know as much about how progesterone affects our brain. And by the time we're over 35, our progesterone levels are declining. And so all these women are having all these symptoms just like me. And, there's a simple fix, but I had no idea.
Ambien. Isn't Ambien the
fix?
The thing that you have to give them, right? Ambien or Valium.
Well, that's what we're trained. And it just, when I switched how I was doing thyroid, switched my thyroid pill to something more natural, got myself on some natural progesterone, I was a completely different person. And if I hadn't been able to make those changes, I would still be having afternoon naps. I'd still be working a couple mornings a week at the health department. Like, I've done so many things in my career that I'll share, but I couldn't have done any of those things because I would have still been stuck in survival mode, probably divorced,
I have to tell you, comparing to myself, I started when I was 39. I started with my hot flashes in the middle of the night. I would wake up every morning at 5 a.m. And then I went to the doctor. I'm a doctor by then, right? And I went to my doctor and I said, hey, I have these things. Like, I didn't choose to wake up every single morning at 5 a.m. with this. And they said, don't worry, you're too young. Like, okay, well, then you kind of believe it's like, maybe I'm too young. Like, then I'm not due for this thing. And then you just wake up for years at 5 a.m. with the hot sweats. And then it's like crazy. And then until you finally get tired of it and find a real physician who's going to listen to you, who's prepared for this. But the truth is that in general medicine, these things are not treated. And even we are physicians. We've been physicians for a long time, suffering with these symptoms. It's like you were not confabulating. Oh, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to just be this, what do you say? The witch.
A monster mom. Yeah.
And, the same thing, like, we have to believe our patients when they're coming with all these symptoms. They're really not deciding, oh, today I'm going to go to Dr. Diaz or Dr. Matthew's office to just bother them with my symptoms. Like, something is really happening to them. And many times, unfortunately, we need those stories to be our stories for us to wake up. But we're looking for help the same way many are looking for help. And then our stories, in your case and my case, have taken us to this thing that's called functional medicine. That can be so many things, right, these days. So tell us about, from a pediatrician now to a patient, and now to a wonderful physician who helps others doing this. Tell us about that transformation when you realize, this is what I want to do. And then talking about imposter syndrome, being a pediatrician, then transforming to this other thing.
Yeah. Well, because of this book from Suzanne Summers, it led me to A4M. And so it's a place where physicians can go and get, trained, and it's evidence-based, and, it's not woo-woo medicine. But I remember the very first step is the A4M at that time had this book that you could buy. And it was all the studying materials because they have an exam that you can take. And so before I even stepped foot in my first lecture, my first conference, I got this book, and I remember getting to page 2. Like, it was this biggest book I have ever seen in my whole life. I got to page 2 and I was totally hooked, because it was talking about how cells work and how vitamin C works and what goes on in our body. And it was all this stuff that I thought they were going to teach me in medical school. It was all this stuff about how our body is supposed to work, what's going on in our cells, what's going wrong, what can we do to fix it? And it was really all about how to get well, not just to treat the problems, not just to prescribe pills. And it's really just common sense medicine. And we've just gotten so far away from that in medical school. And to be honest, I do remember in medical school, like, for example, I remember when we were learning about rheumatoid arthritis, they tried to teach us about things like hot tubs and massages and like other things that you could do besides only writing prescriptions. But at that time in my life, I was so scared of doing something wrong or not knowing something and somebody was going to die. Like, massages were so low on my priority list. I wasn't even interested in hearing about it. But I started going to these A4M conferences, and it was so exciting to learn this stuff. And, most other medical conferences that I had been to, people kind of signed in and then just kind of went and sat by the pool, or you spent most of your time in the exhibit hall trying to get the freebies. Like, people weren't that interested in actually listening to the lectures. But here we were taking notes, our brains were on fire. It was so fun. And all the other practitioners that I met there were so excited about what they were doing, and they loved helping their patients. And they couldn't wait to get back in the office, to share what they've learned with their patients. It was the polar opposite of what I saw happening in, the regular medical world. And still, this is back in 2006. So the degree of burnout and bureaucracy and red tape and all that wasn't anything like what it is now. But at that time, I'd never met an integrative pediatrician. It was just unfathomable to me how you could do this with children. Like, how would you get children to eat healthy? At that time, I was feeding my kids chicken nuggets from the drive-through and fruit roll-ups, thinking that had fruit in it, as a pediatrician. And so I couldn't even imagine how anybody could ever do this for kids. How would you get your kids to take vitamins that weren't Flintstones chewables? So I made a decision to retire from pediatrics. I spent a whole year actually retraining. And then I opened a practice where I was mostly helping women with hormone replacement therapy, with bioidentical hormones. And I had humongous imposter syndrome, because who's going to go to a pediatrician for hormone replacement therapy? And my friends, like most of my friends, are in the medical world, and they weren't really exactly sure what the heck I was doing. And it was hard to explain. Like, back in 2006, really nobody had heard of bioidentical hormones. And so it was terrifying. And as a result of my fear and imposter syndrome, I made a bunch of terrible decisions, and I got myself into massive, massive amounts of debt. My husband gave me really good advice. He suggested, okay, you're learning something new. You're going to open your new practice while we're waiting for this really expensive building upfit, because I felt like I had to have a fancy office around me to make me look like somebody who knew what I was doing. So while we're waiting for this building to be finished, why not go and rent some space in a med spa, in a gym, in a, some other place, and start seeing patients to get some experience? But I was way too scared to do that, because I felt like, what are people going to think of me, a doctor in a gym? Like, it just doesn't sound proper. And so we spent a lot of money trying to have this fancy building. I hired a staff. I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know about sales or marketing or human resources. I had been working at the health department as an employee. I knew nothing. And so at the end of the first year, I'd gotten myself into $1 million of debt. And I had a partner in this with me. Another one of our doctor friends was sort of in this with me. And by the end of the first year, he said, you know what, this isn't what I thought. I don't like it. I'm out. I just want to go back to being an anesthesiologist. And so I had to make a decision. Either I'm just going to shut her down and give up and go back to being a pediatrician. But I loved what I was doing. Like, I was really transforming people's lives. They were getting better. I just couldn't not do this. And so I kept on working just to pay off the debt. Like, I didn't pay myself for years. It was really, in the beginning, it wasn't that bad because it sort of felt like a hobby and a passion project. And I still had my husband. So, we could still put food on the table. It was just a really expensive hobby. But over time, I got busier and busier because people were getting better and they were telling their friends and more people are coming. And then in 2009, Oprah did a whole series on bioidentical hormones and the phone rang off the hook. We were so busy. But by then I was so exhausted because I had patients coming out of my ears. I was charting till 11 o'clock at night. I'm guilty because I don't have enough time to spend with my kids. But if I don't work as much, then I'm guilty because I'm not properly taking care of my patients. I still wasn't able to pay myself. It took 7 years of this, not really able to pay myself. I just funded my 401k and that was it. I worked like a crazy woman. I was under so much stress. And eventually I got to the point like, I don't love this anymore. What the heck am I doing? And that's when I started working with a business coach, which changed everything.
So we had different things that we've mentioned already for you. One, you're passionate. Like when you see something, you want it, that's it. That happened to you as a pediatrician, and that happened to you when you found integrative medicine. The other thing that you've been through twice, at least, those big imposter syndrome episodes, which we get in our heads, right? And number 3, which is the one that got fixed then, was the lack of knowledge. When we are physicians, we graduate with lack of knowledge of what it is, how to run a practice. And not even that, there's different types of practices because you can run an insurance-based practice, and then you can run a no insurance based practice and practice independent. And those will run differently as well, because I've been an insurance-based physician for over 20 years, and the patients will come to you because, there's that safety. So you work with volume, and you were working with volume and still not being able to pay yourself in out of insurance.
Yeah, it was a cash practice.
Physician. Yeah. So, practice. So tell us about, how did you find this coach? What was the thing that said, what, was it your husband that told you about the coach?
Yeah.
No, they didn't bring it this time.
It was my friend Phyllis. So I was feeling trapped, and I had no idea how to generate revenue, because really at this point, working without paying myself was embarrassing. I was ashamed. Like I didn't want anybody to know. Everybody else looked and they saw, oh, this busy practice, and they thought I was so successful. And so I had this shame, and, I didn't want anybody to know what was really happening. And so it was I felt like I was not living authentically, like I'm pretending like it's all great when it really was horribly terrible. But my friend Phyllis, who's has a practice like me, met her at the A4M conference, told me about this practice coaching company that she was working with. It's called Freedom Practice Coaching, and they help practitioners. And it was the first time that I had ever heard of any kind of business coaching for doctors. Like even like business coaching, I wasn't aware that was really a thing. I didn't really know that was a choice. When I started my practice, I opened January of 2007. I'm not really sure there was anything available. I'm sure there was business coaching, but I didn't know of business coaching for doctors. So anyway, this whole time I was just making it up as I went with this lack of knowledge, not knowing there were places to go. So this was literally the first time that I heard of this kind of thing. And it turned out that I made my last loan payment in May of 2014. And then I heard about them and, signed up with them in June of 2014 because the fee to work with them was the exact same as what my loan payment had been. And so it just seemed like it was like meant to be. And it was, it was a significant business expense to work with them, but it was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me, because all of a sudden I learned all these things that I didn't even know I didn't know. And to anybody who's a business person, like these are like kindergarten basic concepts, but I had no idea. Like I understand how light shines on your retina and the rods and cones make you see things. but I don't understand what a profit and loss report is and how my balance sheet works, like really basic things I didn't understand. So they helped me restructure how I was, my business model. They helped me learn how to feel more comfortable talking to patients about money, how to explain the value in my services so that I was able to be paid, what the services were really worth. They helped me learn how to manage my team so that I could really inspire my team to behave like part owners in the practice. So even now, I don't think of them as my employees or my staff. I think of them as my team. And before, I thought of them as my biggest expense in the business. And now I see them as the greatest asset in my business. So it was this huge shift that happened for me. And it set me off on a whole journey of working with other coaches and mentors along the way. And so I am a completely different person today than I was in 2014, and certainly than I was in 2007 when I started.
That's amazing. I talked to, we have a group is the mastermind for business entrepreneurs, and then to learn about entrepreneurship. And it's not the same to know about business or medicine and finance. Even people who know these things, they might not know finance, even though, if they know, even knowing a P&L. It's different concepts. And then getting into this coaching like you did, you might have seen it as an expense. Oh my goodness, how much money I'm going to spend there. But now I'm guessing that you see it as an investment.
Oh my gosh, the return on my investment was completely ridiculous. Like my revenue has gone up. I can't even do the math. Like not quite 10 times, maybe like 8 times. Like the revenue has just gone up so tremendously much since that point. Like it's just a drop in the bucket, the money that I spent on.
So now your business is booming, finally. After you start with coaching, business coaching, how long was it before you started to say, oh, I'm going to pay myself?
Yeah.
I can pay myself. Yeah.
Yay. Within the first 60 days, the revenue went way up. But within the first 6 months, the revenue had doubled, like we were be profitable, I could pay myself. And then it's just kind of, it went up over several years. And then over the pandemic, it kind of flattened, but we didn't drop. Even over the pandemic, we were pretty good. And then after the pandemic, I've done more coaching, learned found a different, you work with a coach for a period of time and you really kind of get what you need from that place or that person. And then you find somebody who has things, different things to teach you. And so it's taken off again. So, but it was really quickly that I was able to pay myself. Like if only they had been around, all those years earlier, it would have made all the difference in the world to me.
So you were 7 years with this wonderful building, not paying yourself. Within 60 days, you're able to do these changes. 6 months, you're doing way better. It's been 9 years right now. So looking back during those first 60 days to 6 months, can you tell us which were maybe like the 1, 2, 3 things that really made a big impact that physicians can immediately start implementing in their practice that make such a difference for you?
Okay. So the first one was, when I first started the practice, I had this business model where we were going to sell people these programs and memberships, but I didn't know how to sell them. So like we would offer it, but people didn't choose to do that. And so we just said, okay, well, that doesn't work. And we stopped it. So when we came back here, the first thing that they did was they put words in my mouth. They gave me a script, what to say about what it was that I was offering with these programs. Because what I had been doing was I was saying, okay, well, this is a program, you get this many appointments and you get this lab test. And like I was listing off the things that were included. And what they taught me to do instead was to talk about the transformation. Like they're not paying for 3 office visits with me. They're paying to be able to sleep soundly and not feel bloated all the time, et cetera. So So they gave me a script and they taught me how to talk about the transformation. And so we don't like the word sell, right? Like as a physician, you never want to be selling somebody something. And if you are, that just poisons the doctor-patient relationship. It makes us feel icky. It makes the patient not want to work with us. But whether you're trying to get them to have a surgery that they really need or take a medicine that they really need, you're always trying to get them to do what they need to do for themselves, right? And so it's the same idea that if you really can help them, you need to be able to say it in a way that they can see the transformation, understand the value, so that they're willing to do the work with you to get where they need to be. So giving me the script and teaching me how to say that was probably the biggest thing. The second biggest thing is helping me to change my brain around how much money I asked people for. Because in the beginning, when people weren't signing up for my program, my initial thought was, okay, well, I'm asking for too much. I have to lower my price. And I just had this conversation with my team last week because I have a physician assistant and an esthetician. We do some aesthetics things in the practice. And we have this one service we do, and we're trying to get people to sign up for a series of 3 treatments so that they actually get the result. And not a lot of people are signing up for it. And so my team is coming to me saying, it's too expensive. We need to lower the price. But it's not about lowering the price. It's really not about the amount of money. It's about how you describe it and how you feel about it. So they felt like it was expensive. And so they weren't able to help people understand the benefits of doing all 3 of these treatments. So I remember the very first thing that I did when I started with the coaching company is I raised the price of this one service that we offered from $1,500 to $1,800. So I raised the price by $300. It was terrifying. I remember I was at my sister's house because we were on vacation. I was lying on the bedroom floor on the phone with this coach from the company, and like I'm in tears over the fear of raising that price by $300. And it's funny for me to think back on it now, how like now that seems like nothing. But at the time it was so scary because I'm afraid I'm going to say this number, $1,800 to people. And I'm afraid of their reaction. I'm afraid of what they're going to think of me. I'm afraid of rejection, if they're not going to work with me, all these fears. And of course it's all in my head. And so they held my hand. Like it was so, I would have never done it if I didn't have somebody to like pat me on the back and pick me up and, tell me everything was going to be okay. And when I started using the script and saying that number, more people bought it than ever before. And, it's just gone up from there. So the script, feeling okay inside about what the money that I was asking for, not feeling like a bad person for asking for money. And then the third thing that was super helpful is they helped me to do a better job with my team. So what I started doing is I bonused my team every month. So if we had a revenue goal, and if the practice met that revenue goal, every member of the team got a bonus. And I think we started out at $150 and it went to $300. So we never didn't meet our revenue goal because they would be on the phones, making sure, if somebody canceled their appointment, they would refill that appointment. Like they were just jumping to it to make sure that everything was running smoothly because they wanted their bonus. And so instead of feeling like they were working really hard, just for their regular paycheck, they could see there was something in it for them. And that changed the whole culture of the office. So that I had been, before I showed up at this practice coaching, oh my gosh, my team was driving me completely bananas. I had 2 of them who couldn't get along, and it was like kindergarten, and they'd come to me in tears. This one said that about the other one, and it would drive me nuts. But I didn't know how to handle that. And so I was doing a bad job running the team, and I didn't know how to do any better. But once we got the culture changed, it was obvious whoever's not really, rowing the boat with everybody else, they got voted off the island and we replaced them with somebody else who did. So whole culture in the office changed, and it's a much, much nicer place to work now.
That's amazing. Those are huge tips, especially, we're not used to do that as a physician in an insurance base because the insurance dictates what we're making, right? In this way, you're dictating what you're making, and there's nobody between the patient and you. Like, you guys are making a decision. This is going to be your transformation, and let's go for it or no, right? So
Right.
that's awesome. From when you started this transformation, how many patients did you already have in your clinic?
So by the time I worked with a practice coaching company, we were 7 years in. So I don't know exactly, because I wasn't keeping track of numbers because I didn't know how to do that. But my schedule was very full. So I had a full schedule. I could not take any more patients. And so what we did is we simply changed so that whenever a new patient came into the practice, they did a program. They weren't allowed to just come in and do fee for service and pay as you go, which is what we had always done before. So the only thing that I changed is when they initially came in, they did a program. And from that, the revenue went up and up and up and up with the exact same number of patients. And so all of a sudden now I had so much more revenue coming in that I was able to hire a nurse practitioner. So now I didn't have to see all the patients. So now I was paying myself. The practice revenue was so much more, and I was seeing much less patients than I was before. So like, it was just win, win, win in every direction. And the patients were having a better experience because now they're not waiting as long for me to see them. Sometimes I'm so frazzled from trying to keep track of everybody, I'd forget to call prescription in, or, I would make a mistake because I'm like just stressed to the max. So they were getting better care. And when they started off in a program, now I'm able to include like health coach and, other people to be on their team. So the patients had a much better experience and they had much better outcomes. So it was better for the patients. So all my fear of asking for more money and, all this stuff, really what I saw happen is better for me, better for my team, better for my patients. And I would never in a million years go back to how we used to do it before, just fee for service and running the rat race.
And how did it's funny because you say the rat race, and people might think that going cash-based practice is, you're off the rat race, but you're not if you're not running it correctly, like you did for 7 years. So what was the conversion from your existing patients? How many, and how was that transformation of changing them from the fee for service to programs? How many stayed with you, and how did their lives change? How long did that take you?
Yeah. So what I did is the people who were already in the practice who were paying fee for service, I just let them. They just stayed in fee for service. So they all stayed. Nobody even knew there was a difference. The only ones that really affected was the new people coming in. And what they did is they did a program for 4 months or 6 months or however long, and then they shifted back over into fee for service. It's not the best way to do it. I think what's better is have somebody come in and start off by doing a program so that you can really work closely with them in the beginning to hurry up and get them where they need to be, and then switch them over to a membership model where there's, a monthly fee. But for me, because by this point I was already so far into it, all I did was start with the programs, and then it worked and we were busy and we were profitable. So we didn't rock the boat by forcing all the old patients to switch over to the membership model. And we still talk about doing it now, but I have so many patients, and sometimes they're patients who don't even come and see me. They haven't seen me for years, but they still come in and buy supplements, or they come and do aesthetic services. They were for friends and family. It's working for us now. And I have a whole team of nurse practitioners under me. So now I choose to still see some patients, but I choose to see patients 7 days a month. So I just go on the calendar, I pick which 7 days I'm going to see patients. And the rest of the time I'm either on vacation or working on admin. I take a vacation 1 week every month. And then the other days I'm just working on the business instead of seeing the patients.
That was something when I met you and we were talking. By the way, guys, yes, we went dancing in Vegas, and we had tons of fun and everything. But one of the things that really impacted me that you told me was like, the less that I work, the more, the better the practice is doing. So can you tell us exactly what you mean by that?
So this is another, maybe it's not imposter syndrome, maybe it's the opposite of imposter syndrome, but it was a really hard concept to believe that my patients would be happy to see anybody else but me. So when I first hired a nurse practitioner, the patients are used to me, and now I'm trying to tell them to go see her. And like a lot of them, they wanted me, but like I'm dying over here. so it was a bit of a transition to try to get people to be willing to go to see her. But I found somebody who was really great. In fact, a patient came to me, a new patient, and she said, I was seeing this nurse practitioner. She was so awesome. She changed my life, but she's no longer at that practice. So now I'm looking for a new provider. And so I tracked that nurse practitioner down and met her and really liked her and offered her a job. And it was so scary to hire her because she had a really well-paying full-time job somewhere else. She's the primary wage earner in her family. So now all of a sudden, now I'm responsible for her and her family, with paying her. But we made the leap and she came on board, and it was something over time. We got better and better at sort of like convincing people that she was great. Once people saw her once, they were happy with her and they never cared about coming to see me again. And then we kept growing and we added a second nurse practitioner. It was kind of the same process. So I've let go of the idea that it has to be me. I just make sure I hire really wonderful people so that my patients will be perfectly happy to see them. I still have those patients who only insist on seeing me. So I just charge more to see me and everybody else goes to see the nurse practitioners. It's hard to get an appointment with me, but that's okay. So it was sort of a transition to get me seeing patients less and less. But I knew that what was important to me at this point now that I'm able to pay myself, what was important to me wasn't making more and more and more money. What was important to me now at this point in my life is I want to have a life. I want to travel. I want to do the things that I want to do. And I don't enjoy being locked in a room with a patient. Like every 30 minutes, I got somebody else on my schedule and I'm so regimented. So I made a decision that I was going to take 1 week of vacation every month. And I just went through and I blocked whenever my husband was on vacation, I just blocked 1 week every month and I'm not seeing patients that week. And we made it happen. I had to take a little bit of a back step over COVID, but once 2021 hit, I was back to it again. And in October of 2021, I realized it was okay with me taking 1 week a month off. I'm going to take 2 weeks a month off. And so starting October of 2021, I blocked my schedule 2 weeks out of the month. And, we made it work. It was, I hired another physician assistant. But now I was able to really work on training my staff. I had a business operations manager and, it took a long time to train him. I was able to think about marketing. I was able to really properly sit down and think about our pricing and our strategies. And so things really grew. And so the beginning of 2022 is when I said, okay, you know what? This is working. I'm just going to work 7 days a month. I wrote it down on the schedule. And in 2022, I spent 14 weeks out of the country. I spent 8 weeks in Mexico at different times in different places. 2 weeks in Spain, 2 weeks in Canada, 2 weeks in India. We went to the Maldives. I've been to conferences in all over the place. And despite the fact that I was out of the country so much, I was only seeing, those few patients. In 2022, our revenue went up by 40% and my net tripled. So the more I have peace, I can just sit and think, the more ideas come. When you're busy, your brain can only focus on tasky things. But if you need to be creative, you need space and more than just time. I can have 30 minutes in between patients. I can't be creative. I need a whole day of nothing planned and just be able to think. And, maybe even it's not a whole day, but we need time and space.
So that's awesome. Let's talk about a couple of things. One is, we've talked about your husband being an anesthesiologist and he was taking 1 week. We know anesthesiologists. I'm an anesthesiologist. Many will take 1 week a month, and many practitioners, many physicians don't know that specialty takes one week a month of vacation.
We picked the wrong specialty, people.
I know. I chose it. I still wanted to be an interventional pain doctor at the time, and I would not choose different. But that happens right now. I'm guessing that you've surpassed the time of vacation. We know that. And the revenue, compared to your husband. When was that switch? When did that happen? And what has he told you about mindset? Has he told you anything else? Or remember when you were feeling like this or that? And the Suzanne Somers book?
Yeah. You know what? He's really my secret weapon because whenever I, no matter what's happening, you always doubt yourself. And, and so he's always backing me up, reminding me like, that I'm doing great. And, so having somebody behind you who supports you, I think is really, really important. Because if you have somebody who's like either, not supportive, like poo-pooing your ideas, or somebody who, you know, is resentful of how many hours you're working, or, just if you got negative energy in
Or
your life,
scared
it just
about the
makes it
whole
hard.
project, right? Scared,
Yeah.
not believing in you, not trusting the process, thinking, oh, you're crazy because you're doing these things. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? Let
Yeah.
go of
Or
that idea.
yeah, it makes it hard. So I'm really fortunate that I have somebody really supportive behind me. And, you know, um, it's, I think that's really been why I was successful, because all those years of not making any money and, feeling ashamed, like if it had just been me, I would have packed up and given up, a million years ago.
So now you've had all these wonderful transformation for yourself, for your life, for your family, for your employees, for anybody who's involved, for your patients. And you're teaching that to others. And you have physicians right now working for you, I believe, understand, like you have around 17 physicians, correct, in a couple of groups that you're teaching. Tell us about these physicians who are coming to you. What's their mindset? How are they feeling when they come to you? What the transformation has been, and what the main challenges have been for them to work on?
So the people that I work with are in a very narrow niche. I work with practitioners who do bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And the reason for that is within the functional medicine community, sometimes it's difficult to have long-standing patients, because let's say somebody comes in and they've got terrible digestive symptoms. There's so much that we can do to help people with their gut health in functional medicine, but then they feel better and then they don't necessarily need to come back. So like it's constantly trying to find new patients. But with bioidentical hormones, because for the most part, it's by a prescription and people feel so much better on their hormones, they tend to keep coming back. So it's really excellent patient retention. And so it actually works well as a business model. So I say all the time, you should never do something because it's a good business model. You should be doing it because it's the right thing for your patients. But it just so happens that we can really help transform lives, and it actually works well as a business model. So I work with practitioners who do bioidentical hormones. And a lot of them are just starting their practices. So they are, maybe leaving their, insurance practice and they're wanting to start something new. Or sometimes they have a cash practice, but it's not working. And, they're like where I was, where like they can't pay themselves appropriately, even though they've been trying. Or maybe they have they have a cash practice, but they've never done bioidentical hormones. And so they're learning how to add that to their practice. So those are the physicians that I work with, and nurse practitioners too, and, whatever providers. And for the most part, people are coming and they are just like I was when I felt like I had to have my big fancy office all around me, because otherwise I felt too scared. And so I'm telling them the same advice that my husband told me, like find a space to rent. Don't, invest in a big fancy office at the beginning. But what I'm really helping them to do is to understand how this business works, how to set themselves up, that script for how to talk to patients so that they're so excited to enroll, to work with you, who to have on your team, how to treat your team, how to see the patients in an efficient way so that, you can have quality of life. So I'm just sharing the things that worked for me to help them. And it's so fun. I'm having people, like I get these text messages all the time. Oh my gosh, I just sold my first program for $24.99. I felt, so scared to say it, but they signed up, yay. So it's been so fun. I love doing it. So that's where my passion is right now. And so that's why I'm really glad that I have the freedom from my regular practice, which is my team is doing a great job of looking after the patients. So now I can really focus on helping these practitioners. And like you, I want to work with just a small group of practitioners to really help them, because, it really changes their lives. And through them, now they're going to help so many other patients. So I can help more people by helping these practitioners than I ever could just all by myself.
that's wonderful, to see the transformation of these physicians and practitioners just really not only change their lives, but the same thing is changing communities really at a time by doing it this way. Before we go, and Shirley, you're going to tell us how physicians can find you so that they can work with you. Tell us, do you have anything else in terms of specific tips that you might want to tell physicians who are considering this type of medicine to bring to their patients from a business side, from a business point of view, something that maybe you haven't discussed, maybe something about, I don't know, marketing, or if there's anything that they have to focus on that they haven't thought about?
Yeah, I think that your personal story is really, really important. So if somebody has, if you're insurance, right, they come because you're insurance. But if you have any kind of a cash practice, who you are is really important. So for example, if on your website, it just has very generic information about what services you offer and, what kinds of illnesses or, your practice treats, or even the fact that if you do bioidentical hormones and talks about like, how does it feel if you're going through menopause? If it doesn't talk about you, it's not going to be as successful, because people want to know who you are. Why do you do what you do? They want to work with you. Like, they want to feel a connection. And that's one of the things that I feel like a lot of people are missing in medicine these days. Back in the olden days, right? It was the family doctor who made house calls. Like, they knew your mom and your grandma, they knew everybody. And that's gone now, right? You get these short visits. Your doctor doesn't really remember you half the time, unless you're a really chronic patient and you have to go see the doctor all the time. But people are wanting, and so they're looking for the person that they want to help them, not the practice that they want to help them. So telling your story, especially if you have a personal health story, feeling hypothyroid for all those years, despite the Synthroid, but being able to share. And that's the opposite of what we were trained to do, right? Like, sort of in medical school, we were sort of taught that, like, keep our personal life out of it and, be professional and appropriate. But people want to know if you are a surfer or, if you suffered with the same kinds of things that they did. It makes them feel like you're more approachable, more human. And it really makes a big difference if you're trying to attract patients to a cash practice.
Thank you. That's totally very different, from the separate wall that we had. I've been doing interventional pain management for a long time. It's like, you have these walls that you have to build boundaries and everything to be able to also effectively treat those patients. But in this other way of practicing medicine, it's really about relationships too, building those relationships with the patients. You're really going to get to know them. And it's very important that they know that you're coming from a point where you not only have the knowledge, but experience will also help them trust you. So building that trust with them. Tell us how we can find you. First, as a patient, like if we want to become a patient of Dr. Deb Matthew's practice, and also if we want to have you help us as physicians with our careers.
Okay, so the practice website is signaturewellness.org. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, we treat people in North Carolina, and we have people sometimes fly in to see us, at least for the initial appointment, if they're from other parts of the country. For people who are BHRT practitioners who want to kind of learn more tips, I have a Facebook group. It's called BHRT Practice Boost. And you're welcome to join the Facebook group for sort of ongoing tips and things like that. And if anybody is interested in like learning more about the coaching, really the best way is just to email me. And my email is Dr. Matthew, so DrMatthew, no S, at signaturewellness.org. And I give my email address out a lot, and I really don't mind people emailing me. The reality is most people don't email me, so it's not like 50 million people are going to flood my inbox. So it's perfectly fine if you have a question. If there's anything I can do to help, you're more than welcome to email me.
Any new conferences coming up in 2023 where we can find you?
I will be back at the A4M in Florida I forget if it's April or May. I think it's in May.
2023 at the time of this recording, guys. Well, thank you very much. You've been a wealth of knowledge, and actually, sharing your story with us is really being very significant. And not everybody likes to talk about their failures, but it was your failures that really made you so successful today. And being in such a way, you're working 7 days a month, and now you're able to service your family, your community, yourself better than ever before.
Yeah.
So
I'm in Cabo right now, actually, for this 2 weeks. I'm working from Cabo because why not?
there you go, guys. That took work, that took mindset change, that took coaching and accountability. So I'm glad that you did all of those, that you didn't give up on being the physician that you really wanted to be for your patients, and the person that you wanted to be for your family. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
That was it for today. Thank you for joining us. Please remember, we're going to have more wonderful resources like we did today with Dr. Deborah Matthew. You can actually contact her if you want to be a patient at signaturewellness.org, or if you want to have her coach you at drdeborahmatthew.com. We hope that you continue to join us, and we're going to continue to bring you more resources like we did today. And please share the love, share this link, subscribe, give us 5 stars, and we'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.
Please remember that Design is not providing specific financial, medical, or career advice. Our only intent is to stimulate your appetite for growth by sharing our experience and those of our speakers, coaches, and guests. Your personal growth and success will be unique to your circumstances and your hard work. We sincerely hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to seeing you next week.